welcome to another iteration of the Sandbox, and I am thrilled about tonight. Tonight we're lucky to have the foresight of Jamie Arbib, who has spent his career forecasting and investing in the future of disruptive technologies and their potential for society as a whole. And this is a theme that I think most of us are quite drawn towards, right? Especially the horizon scanning aspect of it, examining what the future has in store for us, not just as passive observers, but active change makers, active participants who can influence the trajectory, harness the potential in a way that serves those who are currently underserved or unaddressed by incumbents. So, aside from Jamie's professional accolades, he has been kind, patient, compassionate, and open throughout the process of inviting him into the sandbox, which is arguably one of the most valuable traits that we need moving into the future. So yeah, excited to dig deeper into the work you do, Jamie, and please pave the way for this conversation. Over to you.
Thank you so much, and so good to be with you all this evening. I've got the most amazing sunshine outside my window. It's about to go behind my roofline, so I'm going to enjoy it for a couple of minutes until then. But I thought maybe I'd start by giving you a little bit of a kind of a life's journey to date, and then talk about some of the work we're doing, just so I can kind of frame where I'm coming from. So I mean, I'm feeling old in this room. I'm now 49 years old, but I had an easy kind of upbringing and start to life. And, I went to Cambridge University, studied history, and then went into the finance world and went to, went into an investment bank, studied accountant, qualified as an accountant. And then kind of in my early 30s, I just kind of hit a wall. I kind of, I hadn't had a plan. I just drifted from one thing to another. And I suddenly I wouldn't say breakdown's the right word, but I just kind of I just started asking questions that I wasn't prepared to answer, I think. And it was a great wake up call. And, after a lot of soul searching and at that point I kind of got into meditation and I began to kind of, I guess, get to know myself at some level. And I ended up, for the first time in my life, I guess, consciously taking a decision. And I went into venture capital, so investing in kind of startup or early stage businesses, but particularly around climate change, around clean technologies that might solve climate change. And it was a kind of extraordinary time where I mean, I'm going back now 15 years or so, at the time when climate change is really just coming into the kind of general awareness. And there was some fascinating kind of investment opportunities around that. But at the same time, I had this massive frustration with the kind of the dialogue where, and I was working a lot in the US, and the dialogue there around clean energy was really that, well, it was really polarized. On the liberal side, on the Democrat side, it was all about climate change and how terrible climate change was and how we had to solve it and trying to scare the hell out of all of us into doing something. And the other side was all about, really reacting, and clean energy kind of got tarnished with a kind of partisan brush. And although it's, clean energy itself is kind of neutral, it got put in that box with kind of people on the left. So I embarked on this project of trying to communicate the benefits of clean energy to Republicans, to conservatives. And it was fascinating. We hired this guy who works now for Fox News, a guy called Frank Luntz. And he did some focus groups with Republicans. He came back and said, look, climate change is toxic if you talk to Republicans about clean energy. But actually, there are a host of other things the host of other benefits that clean energy have. Number one, the economics. It's going to be cheaper and it's going to be better if we go out into the future. But it's also better for energy security. It's better for health. It's better for resilience and so on and so forth. There were tons of reasons. And it kind of opened my eyes to the fact that, somehow we'd managed to kind of polarize, this incredible technology that had all kinds of other benefits. And anyway, as part of that work, I ended up spending some time with the US military. And I got invited along to this day where they were running a scenario planning exercise, and they were asking the question, what's it going to mean for geopolitics if we get off fossil fuels very quickly? and they invited 10 experts into the room, and 8 of them were from kind of big oil companies and departments of government, or from big kind of consultancies. I mean, you know a lot of the names. I'm not going to share them now, but you'd be able to guess at some of them. And then they had sort of 2 outsiders, me and this guy called Tony Seba, who's now my partner at Rethink X. And basically 8 of these guys all got up and gave the same presentation. They were their forecasts for the adoption of solar, the adoption of electric vehicles and so on. They had these kind of straight line forecasts out to 2040 or even 2050, very low levels of adoption, and very incremental progress. And Tony got up and said, look, that's not how disruption works. It's not how technology disruptions work. They go in an S curve. They start slowly and then they accelerate, and they go exponential, and then they come to dominate the market. And he said, this is over by the 2030s. We'll have a fully renewable energy system, have 100% electric vehicles. And if you guys are going to make your plans on the back of these types of forecasts, you're going to make some horrible mistakes. And I basically got up and said, look, I agree with Tony. And the point of telling that story is, Tony and I went out for coffee afterwards and spoke for months about everything from healthcare through to finance, through to food and agriculture. And our view was then, and still is today, that we're just woefully unprepared for what's coming, that we're going to see a disruption of every sector of the economy over the next decade or so. That's going to transform not just those sectors of the economy, but it's going to transform society. It's going to transform, how we meet our needs, how we think about all kinds of different things. And yet no one was talking about it. No one had, no one had the insight or had done the analysis to really understand how it works. And it really comes down to our kind of the way we perceive the world. And our view is that the modern world's grown up essentially out of the scientific revolution. I mean, the Western way of thinking has, largely come to kind of dominate the world. And it's been amazing. It's created extraordinary progress. We've created some fantastic technologies that have transformed the way we live. But at its heart, the way we think, the scientific method is reductionist, right? So what we do is we take the incredible complexity of the world and we break it apart into little bits. And we've got incredibly good in understanding the pieces, the individual parts. We can understand them and describe them down to the subatomic scale now. But what we've done in that process is to lose an understanding of the connections and the interactions of the parts. And that's really what's causing us problems today. And so Tony and I, we set up this research group called Rethink X, and we're set up as a not-for-profit. And we've written, we started off by writing these research reports about various sectors of the economy. And I'm not going to go into any detail about them. We can talk about them later if you're interested. But we've written about transportation, about energy, and we've written about food and agriculture. And then last summer, we published a book called Rethinking Humanity that really put it all together, that tried to understand how these sectors kind of interact with each other and how they're going to transform society more generally. And I just want to kind of summarize the thesis of that before we kind of broaden out, because I think it's kind of interesting, and it involves really 10,000 years of human history. Because our view is you have to understand the whole before you can understand, any of the pieces. And so, when we look at human civilization, we've seen essentially what we describe as 2 ages today. We have the era before we settle down as farmers and into cities, which we call the age of survival, where essentially we foraged, we are hunter-gatherers, and we kind of scratched an existence. And really our biggest driver was just to survive and to get by. But as soon as we settled down, we moved into what we call the age of extraction. And that's a paradigm really that's still with us today. It's essentially a model of production based on the extraction and exploitation of scarce resources. So we had to find, the food, the animals, the farmland, and eventually the trees, and then the coal and the oil and so on and so forth to feed into our system and to provide the the things we needed. And that system based on scarce resources led to a very competitive world, a world of kind of zero-sum competition. And it's a world in which, you have to kind of exploit or be exploited, dominate or be dominated. So it's created this, what we call the growth imperative. It's driven successive civilizations and societies just to grow and progress as fast as they can. The problem with that system is that hardwired into that system by this growth imperative is essentially the fact that you have to exploit people and you have to exploit the planet. Because if you don't, someone else will, and they'll grow faster and they'll outperform you, and eventually they'll conquer you. So, we've seen examples of civilizations that have lived sustainably in the past, but as soon as another has managed to reach them, they've just been subsumed and dominated. And so actually at the center of our current system, is essentially exploitation and inequality. They're things that are, in some ways, the sort of the essence of our system. And we can do what we can to try and rebalance, to try and, level the playing field. But ultimately, we're always fighting against the fact that this is an inherent part of our system. And that's what's happened over the history of civilization. So what we've seen is societies kind of experiment with different technologies. I mean, we had, the first few cities for the first few thousand years were limited to a few thousand people. And then Sumeria, a city called Uruk in Sumeria, they invented, the written word. They invented the wheel. They invented, they started using bronze. They made these incredible breakthroughs. They invented irrigation and the plow and all kinds of other things. And that led them over literally a couple of centuries to expand from a few thousand people up towards 100,000 people. I mean, these incredible breakthrough. And they dominated this huge area. But they also, when they did this, had to learn how to govern and manage that system. And so they had to learn how to, harness labor. They had to learn how to, they invented laws, written laws. They invented all kinds of things, what we call the organizing system, the social, economic, and political systems that allowed them to run. And a few hundred years later, they collapsed. They breached their limits. They over-salinated, they over-irrigated and salinated the soils. The land stopped producing so much food, and they collapsed. And that's really been the cycle of history ever so often. A few more civilizations came along in Babylon and Egypt, and they kind of reached the same threshold, and they collapsed as well. And then the Romans broke through and got to 1 million people, and eventually collapsed. And we saw Baghdad and various Chinese cities get to the same threshold. And it was only, in the 1800s in the UK that we broke through that threshold again. And we're now past, 10 million people, and we've got this whole kind of industrial era upon us, and we're now reaching our limits. We're now, it's apparent in every way. We're at our social limits, our economic limits, our environmental limits, and we face collapse. And so the challenge really that we see for humanity is not to avoid collapse. We can't avoid it. It's inevitable. But what we can do is allow a new system to break through, a new system that allows us to all live essentially a good life. And the good news is that system is here. It's at its infancy, but we just don't recognize it. We don't see it, and it's driven by technological progress. So what we see happening in the energy space, and in the food space, and in transportation, and in all kinds of other industries, is a whole new system of production emerging. And it's not an extraction-based system. It's what we call the model of creation. So I'll give you if you think of solar, wind, and batteries, which is going to come to dominate the electric power space. Once you've built the system, you don't need anything to run it, right? You've got all the photons, the electrons that you need locally anywhere in the world. You've got a system that is, can run entirely by itself. And it's the same with the new food system that's emerging, the ability that we have now to create proteins and all kinds of other molecules through synthetic methods. Essentially, we're taking, essentially what goes on in the gut of an animal and putting it into a bioreactor. Now, it sounds horrible, but we can produce food now with almost zero environmental impact, with almost, we can with a fraction of the water, with a fraction of the land use, with a fraction of the greenhouse gas emissions. And all these things are going to be cheaper than the old inefficient industrial ways of doing it. We just have to follow the cost curves forward a few years. And so this is going to happen really for the economics. And so we're turning the model of production on its head. We now have a model that's based on abundant, locally available resources. And so, we think over the next decade or two, we'll see this transformation. So, whilst we as a civilization are spending all our time trying to patch up our old system, trying to make it a bit fairer, a bit more equal, trying to solve some of the environmental problems that come with our food, our energy, or our transport systems, what's actually happening is that system's disappearing and a new system's growing, and it's going to grow along that S-curve. It's at the sort of base of that inflection point where it's just beginning to get exponential. And within a decade or two, we're going to see a completely transformed system of production. And it's a system where those sorts of tensions between environmental and economic and social outcomes just get cut, like a Gordian knot. And they just don't exist in that new system. And so the world around the corner is potentially, incredible, prosperous, sustainable. We can meet our needs in all kinds of ways. We can all be freed essentially from, from the drudgery of labor. Humans will no longer be an input into the system of production. It could be the most incredible world, but to get there, we need to know how to manage it and understand it and see it, because it's a wholly different system. All the things that we have in our world today, democracy, free market capitalism, even socialism and communism, these are ideas that grew up around these old industrial technologies. They kind of evolved with them. They're just not suited to this much more distributed network system. Everything changes in this world. It's just all the old relationships don't happen. All these constructs that are appropriate to one era or one time are just irrelevant in some ways, and another time they have different meanings. And the biggest challenge we face in kind of getting there is to drop really our baggage of incumbency, our way of seeing the world that grew up in this industrial era and has been passed down to each and every one of us through the education system, through our social structures, and so on and so forth, and really start again. And this is why historically the incumbents, people who have done well of the old system, have never managed to transform themselves. They just can't let go of what worked, what they perceived or what their way of seeing the world. And so the challenge for us is really to recognize that everything in our world, everything we see, they're really human constructs. And we need to find new ways to understand the world, new ways to manage it, new ways to govern it, and new ways essentially to live. I'm going to leave it there because that felt a little heavy by the end. I think we should probably open it up a little bit. I get slightly carried away, but we can go off in any direction, I guess. I'm entirely in your hands.
Thanks, Jamie. Thanks for sharing that. We've got some interested folks in the chat who want to follow up on it. We've got 3 folks. I'm going to start it off with Charlie. And Charlie, once you're done, just pass it on to Felix. And yeah, thanks for sharing that, Jamie. You seem to have got the chat excited with people wanting to share. Over to you, Charlie.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. It's a really like exciting and very kind of compelling vision, and I really like the division into the age of survival and extraction. It makes a lot of sense. I was wondering, like, if you see any values from the age of survival that will come into play in the future. Is it the age of creation that comes after that? So, like, I mean, I think that so let's say that maybe like hunter-gatherers or something. There are hunter-gatherer societies that are still around today, and often they seem to be like living in some abundance, albeit without like medical technologies and things like that. So maybe life expectancy isn't so great, but like things like permaculture and kind of what's the word I'm looking for? Kind of, but like they engage in complex systems without kind of extracting from them, although they can do. But so yeah, I guess what I'm trying to say is like, are there things from like the early stage, the pre-extractive stage, that could come into play and like come back as part of the new stage?
Yeah. So I mean, I kind of think of it as them being kind of ancestors of what might come. That you're right. I mean, there was a holism that existed in prior civilizations and in I guess pre-Neolithic cultures that kind of understood the interactions and the interrelationships, and understood that if you chop down a forest, then you probably wouldn't have any wildlife in a few years' time, and you'd starve. In a way that we don't today. So I think absolutely there's that essence of, I mean, holism that we need to redevelop and rediscover. My sense is that we can build on that and we can add it. We don't want to discard the incredible scientific knowledge that we have, that kind of reductionist knowledge, but I think we want to supplement it with the connective tissues that kind of understands the interactions and the interrelationships and so on and so forth. So I'm sure there's a lot. I'm sure there's a lot we can learn. The reason I'm slightly kind of skeptical about jumping in wholeheartedly is that sometimes I feel that you know, we can put some of these cultures on a pedestal to some degree, that they, you know, every culture and every time comes with its kind of good and its bad. And I think there's a lot we can learn from, you know, Eastern religions and these sorts of early civilizations as well. But it's a new context and everything has new meaning. And so, you know, we'll need to evolve our own version of this kind of hyper detailed but hyper holistic worldview as we go forward. And I think we can see the seeds of that. I mean, there's much more understanding of kind of complexity and so on in all kinds of ways. I think, you know, Western medicine's a great example where, you know, you've got an ear expert and a gut expert and a kind of leg expert or whatever, and then you know, we're finally realizing actually it's all kind of connected, that you can chase symptoms around the body and just cause some other problems, but actually you've got to treat the whole, you know, the mind, the gut, the body, and that's, you know, it's only now dawning on us, which, I mean, it seems extraordinary. And it's the same with, you know, the rest of society and the rest of civilization, I think. So yeah, there's a lot to unlearn, I think. I think that's the biggest challenge we face.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'll pass it to Felix.
The unlearning is definitely a big challenge. I really feel that from you. And but the reason I put the mark in the chat was to ask whether, so in the 20th century, when we were when the Europe was starting to industrialize and the world was industrializing and all this was going on, the economists, like the Keynesian economics, was saying, oh, we'll be working 15 hours by the end of this century because it'll all have been mechanized and these labors that are required of us now will have disappeared. And those labors did disappear because they were replaced by machines. To some extent, but then in the modern world now, people are working in just as much, and it's I just wonder, like, the vision that you have is it's quite similar to that was modeled like, I don't know, decades ago, and just where what's going to be the fundamental thing that drives things further from this point now that wasn't there then?
Yeah. So yeah, I hear you. You're absolutely right. And, you know, I mean, I mean, forecasting the future is a kind of, you know, a fool's errand in many ways. You know, you're going to be wrong, right? I mean, it's I mean, actually, Tony and I have started, I mean, people call us futurists and it kind of annoys us. And we started calling ourselves todayist. You know, we try to say, look, through our lens, we can understand what's going on today and see the kind of possibilities that are emerging tomorrow. But, you know, the path we take into that space, you know, it kind of depends on the decisions we take along the way. But I mean, you're right. I think, I mean, I would, you can talk, I guess, in degrees of confidence. And I think, you know, if you think of what we call the system of production, you know, we will largely be removed of it. I can see a kind of clear trajectory that you know, we're no longer an input essentially into this system of production. But, you know, we'll find other things to do with our time and other ways of making money and you know, in some level we might reconceive of what work is. I think one of the things we see happening is just the cost of the things we need plunging. And these are vastly more efficient. It's essentially biology in some ways replacing physics in terms of how we conceive of the system. And, you know, we can see a situation where energy is essentially nearly free, where food is nearly free, where you know, transportation could largely be free. and you know, healthcare transformed and becoming, you know, vastly cheaper because we moved to a kind of prevention-based paradigm instead of a treatment-based. So you get to this world where you know, the meaning of everything kind of changes. You know, what work means and how we meet our needs and actually what reward needs. I mean, if you live in a world where you've kind of got all your basic needs provided for, you know, some of the drivers in the old system that drive us to kind of hoard and kind of flaunt wealth and so on, they kind of go away. You know, you don't need pensions and savings and, you know, a kind of massive rainy day fund. We just get comfortable with kind of providing, you know, as we go along. And so, I mean, I don't know the answers, but I do know that kind of everything changes in a world like that, and exactly what it means, you know, I don't think we'll know, and it will mean different things in different areas. I'm sure that, you know, some parts of the world you'll see a kind of a hoarding and a you know, continue, but other parts, I hope, you know, we'll find new ownership models and new ways of kind of thinking about all these kinds of issues.
Let's hope so.
So on to Stefika, who is next.
Cool, thank you. Unfortunately, I arrived late, so I didn't get to hear everything you said, but what I did hear was very interesting, so thank you. I was very curious to follow up on your idea of new societies and how technology is going to allow, you know, us to change so much that we have a completely new social and economic order. And I say this because I wonder whether the age of extraction is really at an end. Is it not just now an age of social extraction? Because we already have data extraction, and, you know, rather than destroying our old social structures, we've now have surveillance capitalism, data colonialism, a growing digital divide. And so really what technologies, I mean, I'm a positive, you know, I'm an optimist. I like to think positively, but equally what we've seen is just more nefarious ways to carry out neoliberalism. And the products that we're creating, such as like Alexa, it's making us more lazy, or it's making things more easy, but it's also listening to us and sort of scaring us into conforming more, creating a new social order, but in a way that doesn't benefit our freedoms, in a way that actually deepens inequalities. So I've been thinking about that a lot, really, but I want to know what your take is on how you think we might be able to get out of that loop.
Yeah.
If I could quickly interject as well, I'll let Jamie answer, but also Stefika, you said a lot of really interesting words, so we would also like to hear your views if you think you have an answer to that. So after Jamie shared, you have the license to share your perspective as well, not just a question, just to put that out there for everyone.
Yeah. So I mean, we describe our kind of governance structures, our institutions, our you know, our social economic systems and so on. We describe them as our organizing system, which is really kind of how we manage and govern and even understand the world. And the systems we have today in the West, and actually the systems that are kind of dominating around the world, you know, these have been around for hundreds of years, right? They kind of grew out of the, you know, the Enlightenment and scientific revolution and that kind of era, you know, in the late Middle Ages into the modern world. So, you know, democracy, free market capitalism, you know, even the concept of the nation state. I mean, these are relative, you know, these are kind of constructs that evolved alongside the kind of industrial era technologies. And you know, they all come from, well, I mean, they all evolved. The reason we have them today is because they were the best fit for those industrial era technologies. It's a sort of evolutionary process where, you know, we experimented with all kinds of different methods of doing it, but the one that kind of best enabled progress won out, and it was a system that essentially the UK developed and then exported to the US, and now the US has kind of exported, and every other version, you know, you can slot in, you know, socialism into whatever, or you know, central planning of an economy, or however you want to kind of rearrange the pieces. We've tried pretty much everything, and you know, they've just slowed down progress essentially, and so we're at this era where now, you know, these human constructs in some ways we see as, well, at least our leaders see as kind of fundamental truths, right? We're not going to let go of them easily. You're not going to give up on the US Constitution or the concept of America or any of these things. And this is why, you know, disruption or change always comes from the outside. I can't see any way in which the West, you know, Europe, even China or the US is kind of going to let go and change enough to enable us to, you know, to adapt and thrive into the future. And this is why I was saying earlier that I think, you know, it's inevitable that the old system collapses. The hope is that we find a new system that springs up and develops that can take its place. And it's likely to come from the edge. It might come from, it might come from within one of those regions, but at a city level or a community level, where we find the new kind of structures and social, political, economic systems that work better with you know, the new production system that's emerging. But yeah, I can't see us willingly letting go of all of these concepts. And if we try and run these new technologies, a new production system through those old models, I think it's a disaster. And this is what's going to lead to the downfall of the US and the downfall of Europe. I don't think we're going to sit and agree to change them. I just don't see. I don't see that, you know, how that happens. You can't. I mean, part of the problem we see is that, you know, we've got a world in some ways that's underpinned by information, and so you get these kind of network effects that happen in an information system that just mean that, you know, huge amounts of power gets concentrated in these sort of, you know, scarce platforms. And if we run the kind of, you know, the old models of ownership and so on, we're just going to see increasing inequality, increasing problems, and so on and so forth. So, yeah, my gut tells me that this, you know, we have to hit a wall and collapse in the West, but we've got to hope that something else develops from either within or without that can come and hold us through that and kind of take over when the time's right. I'd love to hear your view.
Oh, it's such a big stuff. Yeah, I mean, I'd love to be as optimistic and say, you know, because you talk about progress and how maybe perhaps the best model, we've always found the best model to feed progress. But what is progress? I mean, I'm not particularly, I could have criticisms about where we are today based on the skills that we have, based on the information that we have. Surely we would have a much better society. Surely we would have eradicated inequality. Why are people in the UK hungry? I mean, with all the wealth that we have, it doesn't make sense. So I don't think that the way that we choose to progress is always the right way or the most humanitarian way. And it's with that in mind, and also thinking about how every society has a power imbalance, even in communism, even in socialism, that power is at the root of it. And technology, when we talk about technology, we are talking about power. We're talking about getting our hands on a new type of almost magic alien power that we haven't had before, that is going to be controlled by a small group of people who are writing those algorithms, who are designing those products. And we don't have, it's not even about regulation, because the regulators are in, you know, hand in hand with the corporations, which some people say is the corporatocracy, sort of like the new layer of corporates ruling the world. And yeah, I don't know. I think I'm a little bit more pessimistic, just because I don't really agree that, you know, we have to question what we think of as progress, I think, in the end.
We've got Karis up next with a question. I would, before we go on to Karis though, I would like to invite like Stefika, because we know each other personally, and anyone in this room. I'd love to like continue on this conversation, because I think the questions you're asking are very important, and I found some interesting people online and thinkers who give pieces of the answer. But I think the other thing to look at is maybe we bring pieces of the answer. Yeah, on to you, Karis.
So I was going to ask, what are some of the changes that you reckon will happen to the production system that will improve it?
So, yeah, so I mean, we can talk about kind of any sector of the economy really, but I mean, you know, I think maybe I'll talk about you know, electric power, because it's a sector that comes with big problems and big impacts, and it's kind of misunderstood how change might happen, and I think it, you know, might help illustrate you know, some of the things we're saying. So, you know, the analysis we've done of electric power suggests that we can get to a, you know, 100% solar, wind, and battery energy system, you know, relatively well, very easily and economically. So you know, it's the cheapest form of energy going forward 5-10 years. So, you know, it'll be driven by economics. This doesn't need big kind of government intervention to get there. But the way you build a 100% renewable system to get you through the kind of dark days of winter, you can do it in a number of ways. You can either massively overbuild kind of storage, batteries, to allow you to kind of charge up ahead of time to meet those kind of dark winter days, or you can massively overbuild supply, you know, solar panels or wind turbines. And when we model it, you end up with this U curve. So, you know, at either end, lots of batteries or lots of solar. It's hugely expensive, and in the middle is a sweet spot where you get the cheapest system, which is also cheaper than any other alternative, fossil fuel or otherwise, given the decline in costs we expect to see over the next decade or so. But what's interesting about that system is, you know, you get with it, you know, every other time of year, every other day of the year, you get a kind of superabundance of energy, right? You're just producing much more energy than you need because you've had to overbuild to get through the winter. And we see that as a problem today. We talk about curtailing this kind of surplus of power, but actually it's a huge opportunity. You'll have, you know, essentially for free, 2 or 3 times the amount of energy that we actually need today. So it'll be, you know, this what we call superpower, this superabundance of zero cost energy, and that'll transform kind of everything, or transform industry after industry. You know, things like steel production. We could do entirely with this sort of overabundance of energy. We could desalinate water. We could, you know, do vertical farming. We could do, you know, all kinds of different things. You know, produce green hydrogen. You know, mine cryptocurrencies. All kinds of. So I mean, you know, what happens when you have a disruption like this is you have what we call a phase change. You know, you get a different system state. It's just a totally different architecture, totally different rules, and you know, that's one of the big changes we see, and you know, that's you know, it's going to get to the point that we have for large parts of the year essentially have free energy, and energy will go from being a bad thing. Energy use will go from being a bad thing to being a good thing. I mean, energy use has had enormously positive social impacts. And if we take out the negative environmental impacts, then actually, you know, using energy is no longer bad. You know, it's good. it's transformation, and we see similar disruptions going on in you know, in transportation and ultimately in healthcare and pretty much every other sector. I mean, the way we look at the world really is that, you know, technological progress is, we define as an improvement in our ability to manipulate matter, energy, or information. You know, those are the foundation blocks of our physical world. And technological progress is neither, you know, good nor bad. In many ways, it's what comes with it. And you have to kind of understand the whole system to really understand that. But certainly, you know, our abilities, our technological abilities are just skyrocketing, right? And it's going to give us the opportunity to do some incredible things. But, you know, with any kind of change comes adverse consequences, and the challenge really is to try and, you know, capture the good, capture the benefits, and do what we can to mitigate the adverse consequences and to foresee them if we can. And that's always been what's caught us out historically.
Amazing. What do you think about like food packaging and plastic?
Yeah, I mean, you know, there has been there are technologies coming along that can replace that. So we're seeing an ability to well, either synthesize or actually, bio ferment alternatives to plastic packaging. But actually, I think the biggest change, to food packaging will come from a transformation of the food system that would just be producing everything much more locally. It'll be much more modularized, and we just won't need that kind of packaging, and it'll be direct to consumer. And so, it won't go through these huge, long kind of supply chains before it gets to the supermarket and you pick it up and take it home. So, how we think about packaging kind of gets transformed, and we expect that to happen, within the next decade or so. That we'll start with quite large centralized food production facilities, and over time it will modularize to ever smaller scale, and we'll see food produced locally in communities, essentially.
Brilliant, thank you.
Up next, we have Alice. And once you're done, Alice, if you could pass it on to Felix, that would be great. Thank you.
My exclamation mark was there a long time ago, so it's really, really tricky to package everything together. But it's all connected, so I guess it's all adding to the same thing. One quick one to what Charis, I don't know how to say it, but one thing that on her question to add is about what I understand about solar panels and wind is that to create a solar panel, to build one, you are using very precious material, and it will die eventually, and you have to make another one. And so that's not really renewable or really sustainable as it appears to be. And also with the wind ones, if you want to make these massive wind things, you need to do it in, I don't know, like the construction of them in the middle of the ocean, for example, is super crazy. And I just, there's that, I don't understand how that adds up to the fact that it is great and renewable and it will help everything. But then at the same time, it's also having this, I don't understand the balance between how much it's destroying and how much it's helping. But just before, I wanted to say quickly that it is so nice to hear somebody talk about the future in a positive way and in an exciting and like abundant instead of apocalyptic, depressing, but using the apocalypse as something exciting. And I like to think about the apocalypse as something like, it's a new opportunity or some new way of putting the things together in a different way with all the information we've gathered in a new and exciting way. And about the question that Felix had, because it was all because of Felix's question, and he asked about this, how it used to be about survival of like hunting and living, looking for caves, or I don't know what they were doing. And then from there, they went on, like, I often think of how that is very similar to how if you live in a city and you do a 9-to-5 job, and that's also survival and you don't really get a lot of free time. And then the same if you are, I don't know, squatting, and then you have a lot of people that in the end are spending all their energy into, it's similar to what's the hunter-gatherers, because you're always looking for a cave or you're always looking for a food supply, and it's like always like this is taking all your energy, and it's like, oh, okay, so maybe make in the future we have factories, but then people are actually having to put a lot of offices, and then people are spending all their time in office, so it's always survival. So it was nice to hear Felix's question, because it made me realize that okay, so the way of developing a technology with the objective of having more time to spend doing, like having time instead of having to survive, and using our time to survive. And the way that like everything is more global and more big, and it's going into this direction of massive global world, and then this idea of like, oh, we have to do things small scale and then I don't know, there's just so now I'm getting blurry, but I'm trying to say something about how the development of the technology, I guess, has a lot to do with the way we communicate with each other and the way we collaborate with each other, and how maybe by good communication and good collaboration we can gain time, because somehow. And I pass it on to Charlie? No, Felix? Felix. I don't know. I'm confused now.
You did great. You did great. I think Jamie, that was quite a lot. So let's let Jamie speak a little bit on what his thoughts were. And then after that, Felix can jump in. Sorry.
Yeah, amazing energy. And I'm not sure I can keep up with you. But I mean, I think the only way things have ever changed ultimately is through experimentation, right? Just constant, I mean, this is how we solved all our early problems when we settled down into cities and tamed animals and plants. We were just confronted with a whole bunch of new problems, and we had a surplus of time, and we worked out how to solve them. And some of them took very long periods of time to solve, and that's kind of the it's one of the key lessons of progress. And I think as we go forward, it's just this experimentation we need to do at a kind of civilization level, that if we're going to work out how to live with this new system of production. I think it's we talked about the difference between survival and extraction, and we call what we see as the new system of production being as a creation-based system. So we call it actually the age of freedom, but it's a creation-based system of production where the old rules don't apply, and we don't know. What we do know is that the old ways of running it and understanding it don't work, or won't work. But we're not going to sit in the room and plan it. This is not going to be delivered. We speak to governments, and we speak to investors, and we speak to businesses and all types, and they all say, can you write us an action plan? Can you tell us how to do this? Can you tell us how to plan into the future? And we always say, no. It's not how it works. You can't write a 10-year plan or a 10-point plan, and this is how we're going to learn. We just need to find ways to decentralize and experiment and try and in some ways mimic in our governance structures and institutions that sort of very distributed network system. It's much more kind of a biological system. It's almost like a kind of mycelium network, a series of connected nodes with exchanging information and materials across it. But it's it's just a very different world that's emerging, and I think this temptation to kind of plan for it, to plan it, and to want to have some kind of certainty is the wrong one. What we can do is create principles, and within which we operate. But beyond that, we've got to let go and see what happens.
Yeah, thank you. And that's kind of related to how I was talking about the collaboration and organization. Because if we can learn new ways of organizing or communicating that work with chaos or work with unknown.
Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, thanks.
So Jamie, just to make sure I've got it, is the idea of living in an era of creation is that on a local level you'll be able to avoid scarcities, and I guess for if we take the modern day as like an example, there's a lot of benefit that you can gain by creating a system of scarcity where you control the product that is scarce, or just in any situation. Do you think that there'll be like within the model that you and Tony have developed, is there a an idea of there being a friction where things move from a centralization to a decentralization, or is it part of? Is it like, how are things going to decentralize? I suppose is what I'm asking. But then again, you said you can't model it, you can't predict like this. But I'm just wondering if, because that is a very important difference within that creative future. Yeah, because it's like what Alice was saying. Like, say we introduce a technology that's like, even now, like, that you can grow like burgers, like ham, like meat proteins in a petri dish. That's like, if that was to be decentralized, everyone would have that. But then is everyone going to have everything everywhere? I'm confused.
Yeah. I mean, the way we see it is we have currently an extraction-based system, and every civilization has been like that. It's just been bigger and bigger scale, and that leads to this sort of centralized and hierarchical model through which we govern it and manage it, and it's easy to kind of to control it through that system. When you go to a distributed system, think of information, right? The industrial version of the information system was, newspapers and TV and printing presses and so on and so forth, right? And so very narrow distribution channels, high barriers to entry, high cost, and you can run it from the center. You can regulate it and control the flows of information from the center. Now we have a completely distributed system where every single person's kind of connected to every other person directly, and can produce their own content. There are no barriers to entry. There are billions of distribution channels, and it's completely unmanageable through those, using the old tools of centralized censorship, or, however we want to, those old industrial era tools. And this is what we're seeing. We're seeing it's almost like the church and state when the printed book came along. They lost complete control of the flows of information, and that essentially ultimately led to their downfall. We're seeing the same kind of process now, where those centralized authorities can no longer control the flows of information, and it's but they don't know how to manage it. They don't have the tools through which to manage it. But that's happening across society now. So we're going to see that in every sector. Where, and what we mean by creation based is, yes, exactly what you're saying, is that locally and at whatever scale, think of a city level, or a town level, or a community level, we'll have everything we need to produce all the food, energy, anything we really need. We need some seed, kind of seed of kind of metals, raw materials, but everything else is available in abundance pretty much anywhere in the world. And that's transformative, because we're no longer, in that centralized system. We're no longer squabbling over scarce resources. It removes all kind of geopolitical tensions. It removes otherwise, but it's a system where we have enough of everything, and we can produce what we need without any kind of, well, not without any, but without a big impact on our broader environment. So yeah, it's just, this is why we call it the age of freedom. It's just a totally different world. We haven't come across it before, and getting there is the hard part. And this is why I was saying earlier that we need to kind of unlearn everything we know, everything we thought we knew. That everything that gave us a big advantage in the old system is going to be a massive disadvantage in the old system. And it's a kind of baggage of incumbency. It's why companies get disrupted. It's why civilizations get disrupted. It's why the old never lead in the new system. And it's an exciting challenge, but yeah, it's it's not one we're devoting much effort or time to trying to deal with right now. Which, what we're essentially doing when we talk about the problems in our world today. So we're trying to apply sticking plasters to the old system. We're trying to patch it up, and we're trying to solve our environmental problems. We're doing it by patching up the old system, making it a little less bad. Or our social problems, we're trying to redistribute a little bit, or use the old tools. But as I was saying before, inequality and environmental degradation, they're hardwired into an extraction-based system. The best we can hope for essentially is equality of exploitation. But that's not a very high bar, right? It's a whole new world.
Thanks, Jamie. you really have people engaged because they're still dropping exclamation marks. What I'm going to do is we're going to go to Jack and then Charlie, because Charlie had a chance to speak already. But if we could keep it kind of short, because it's getting long and people's attention spans. So if you could, if you could go up next, Jack, that'd be great. Thank you.
That's very kind, thank you. Firstly, Jamie, I joined a little late, so I must offer my apologies. But I've been very intrigued by what you've been saying, and my question kind of ties into Felix's. And do correct me if I've made a mistake here, but you're talking about this idea of decentralization. However, even all the way down to city or even town or even community level. But if you've got things like, pardon me, solar panels or like solar farms and the battery farms to store this energy, some of these things surely require huge sunk costs, which would make them quite infeasible on town-like scales. How are you gonna approach that challenge?
Yeah. So we just write about it. First thing I should say, we don't actually solve anything. But you're right. I mean, it kind of depends where you are. Okay, so we've done work for out in India where we've looked at the Indian system, and they're going to have this incredibly low cost energy system because they don't have the winter problem we have. They have pretty even sunlight, all the way through the year, so they don't have to build this huge overcapacity, and they'll have much cheaper energy. The further north you go, the harder it gets, and the more expensive your energy system is going to be. So, we will just be, less competitive in these parts of the world, and energy underpins all kinds of other sectors. So, we'll have to work with it. But it might be that the world pecking order kind of reverses around some of these things. I mean, that there is a greater abundance of energy and other resources in parts of the world. Europe's not, we're endowed with coal reserves and oil reserves, which helped us dominate the previous era, but the kind of things that we need in abundance in the new era we don't have so much of. So it's going to be harder and more expensive, and this is when we talk about there's a sort of advantage of incumbency while you're in the box seat. You kind of dominate the supply chains, and you've got geopolitical control, you've got more money, and and so on and so forth. But it really becomes a baggage when you're going in through one of these disruptions, one of these what we call a phase change to a new system state. Is that a lot of your advantages become disadvantages. You can't your old infrastructure and so on and so forth. It doesn't, it's not necessary in the new world. And so, when you see in, the kind of effect where, parts of Africa have, kind of leapfrogged in terms of mobile communications and banking and so on and so forth, that actually there's a big advantage not having that kind of sunk infrastructure and all the interests and power dynamics that come with it. And so, I actually expect that, we're somewhat screwed in the West as we come into this new era.
All right. Well, let's go for Charlie. Charlie?
I was just going to ask something about the role of space exploration, or a figure like Elon Musk, who is kind of like in some ways very forward thinking and kind of a disruptor, and thinks in ways that other people don't about scale and time and maybe like hyperabundance as well. But also seems to have a very kind of like, I mean, from maybe this is just the way it's depicted in the media, but like this kind of, we'll have this like libertarian society on Mars to go and like colonize it and extract it. And that's like, seems like a kind of marrying up of the mindset that you and your think tank have, but then also like a very extractive mindset as well. So I don't know if there's a question in there, but just if you have any thoughts about like space or kind of getting materials from elsewhere, if that's part of this story.
Yeah, I mean, I think materials, no, because we just won't need them. I think there's a, we've got a period through the 2020s, maybe early 2030s, where we're building out a lot of this new infrastructure, the energy system, particularly, and the food system. But once we're there, it's just topping it up. These things kind of last, not forever, but an extraordinarily long time. We'll have a much more kind of circular model. So I don't think we'll need there's nothing that we need is not available in enough quantities. We just have to learn how to process it and extract it during that period. But longer term, we won't be in that one. In terms of space, I think it's a risk thing for Elon Musk. I think it's there are risks to life on Earth. I mean, we've got all our eggs in one basket, and the idea is there are a number of things that could go wrong here, and we probably should spread our wings. We don't know if we're the only kind of sentient life or conscious life in the universe, and I think it's about it's about risk mitigation, I think, in many ways, and probably just a hell of an adventure as well. I just it's not something I've given a whole lot of thought to, but that's my impression of where he's coming from, in that respect. We've got enough challenges down here, I think, for most of us to occupy our time.
Stefika.
I'm going to be super quick, first of all, because this is ending, and also I have a Portuguese lesson in 3 minutes. But I just wanted to say, I've been, listening to this and just thinking a lot about intentionality and dreaming, because the whole idea that technology is just happening and we are innovating and who knows what's going to happen, it could be quite a dangerous thing, because it left up to thinking about, and I love your whole idea about we need to get rid of the systems that don't serve us anymore, because I completely agree, but I worry that without intentionality, we will just do things and create things that serve the systems that have served us, that we just do what we know. So even thinking about plastic packaging that came up before, we shouldn't even need packaging in the future, really. If we want to create a whole new order, we should just all go around we'll find a way to not even need something that's so extractive, and then you just throw it away and it ruins the environment. We need to be thinking in a completely different way, but to be thinking in a different way, I think we need to be intentional about it. We need to dream and think. So I do wonder, whether it is worth making a sort of 5-point, 10-point, 20-point plan based on what we already know. Because if you think about, I don't know why the toilet just jumped into my head, but toilets have always bothered me, because you go into some countries in Asia and you see like the fanciest electronic toilet with water that squirts and a thing, and electronic hair dryers, and then you go to some remote countries that they're still using squat toilets. Why didn't we use that innovation to help someone else? And so sorry, I feel like I'm tweeting the same horn again, but yeah, I guess this whole thing of being intentional and sort of, you mentioned before having, I think, principles and values, should we make that the forefront? And with that, I'm really sorry I have to go. I've got my lesson now. But thank you so much. I found this really, really enjoyable. Thank you, everyone.
Right.
Any thoughts on toilets, Jamie?
I think go to Japan if you like toilets. I was out there recently, and amazing what some of these things do. Every time you go to your bathroom, you kind of get shocked by something that's going on with these. They have, music and heaters and blower. All sorts of things. It's extraordinary. And actually, there's a part of a small region in Tokyo where it's kind of dedicated to kind of sanitary ware, and it's extraordinary to kind of wander around. Anyway, sorry, that was much more on toilets than perhaps you were hoping for.
That's all right. That's all right. Thanks for sharing, Stefika. I felt like that was. There's been a lot of really interesting sharing in this session from the participants as well, and I just really want to encourage you to point the answers back at yourself, because I think a lot of us in this chat room have the answers, and it's about how we connect with each other and start to build these things. Do some of us, I can imagine Felix printing his own burger and connecting an Alice with her stuff, and I can imagine a lot of us here doing and experimenting. But I guess the experimentation is not just in the technology, but it's in how we connect with each other. And in the Rethink Humanity PDF that you can find in the website that I've put in the chat, Jamie and Tony go into this a bit more. And the emphasis is not so much on the technology that's developed, but it's how we use the technology and like Stefika would say, the intention behind what we're doing in the organizational structures. And with that note, I think I am going to end it. I'm going to mention next week's event, same link. Next week, we're going to have Leah Gayer. She is, thank you very much, Jamie. Thanks for today. It was really enjoyable and you brought the energy as well. So that was really great to hear. So yeah, so next week, Tuesday, 6 p.m., same place, same link. We have Leah Gayer, who I think is experimenting with some of these organizational models with her Compass Collective, which is an arts and creative company that is helping refugees integrate into living in London and also expressing themselves through art, through video, through film. And she's going to be here from 6, doing a similar thing to what Jamie did, explaining her journey into this. And there's going to be a lot to learn from. On that note, I'll give it to Sim to wrap it up with a moment of silence, and we can all go and enjoy the sunset after that.
Thanks, Jack. Yeah, so also just so you guys know, if you missed out on part of the conversation or Jamie's bit, this will be recorded and uploaded, and you can revisit any of these conversations again. But yeah, thanks for this, Jamie. It felt like a Matryoshka doll of conversations where we just kept unpacking and new stuff came around. And I feel like at the end of the day, there's always going to be stuff, and that's the beauty of it, right? You never stop exploring. All right, so we're going to end this with a moment of...
Can I say goodbye first?
Yeah, sure.
My supper, sorry. Thank you.
No
It was
worries.
fun, guys. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
And please reach out if you want to carry the conversation on.
All right, take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Yeah, we can just end it with a moment of silence. If you guys could unmute, if you feel comfortable doing so. So we just engage with each other's settings, locations, take in everything we discussed, or if you just want to let it wash off and kind of let it find its way back to you whenever you want, you can take either approach. And I'll call you back in a minute. Thanks, guys.